Here's the economic update. I'm going to start at the other end today just because it's more recent. Our manufacturing data came in. We have basically New York State on August 17th. We have Philadelphia on August 18th. They basically look the same, so I'll just go through this one. So they're optimistic. Business conditions are now highest in 4 years. New orders and shipments are up. And we have an increase in unfilled orders, meaning there's opportunity for other people to come in and fill those orders. And there's a longer lead times, again, more opportunities for manufacturing. Inventories have declined, which is why people are ordering more things because they don't have inventory. Supply availability has worsened to make these products, so that might reduce the ability to manufacture some things, so that's not necessarily good. Employment and the average work week are currently up, so that's good news. And input and output prices have gone up. So basically, if you're paying more, at least you're able to charge more for the products that you're producing. For business leaders on August 18th, Business Leaders Survey, business activity is steady. The climate is worse than typical. However, employment is up slightly. Wages are up modestly. We're worsening on our supply availability. Our input prices are still increasing. So these pretty much mirror each other. So it's good to have multiple reports that give you the same idea. You don't want things that contradict themselves. Real estate on August 11th, we have the National Association of Realtors came out with the existing home sales are at 4.06 million existing home sales. This is up 0.7% year over year. And we have 1.54 million for sale. This is down 0.6% year over year. We have 4.6 months of supply. A balanced market should have 6 months supply. So it's still on average a seller's market, not a buyer's market. Once you get beyond 6 months, then it starts to move into a buyer's market. Again, everything's local. We'll get into this next for pending home sales. The median home sales price has been $431,400. On August 18th, National Association of Realtors came out with pending home sales. They're currently down 2.3% month over month, down 2.2% year over year. They are noting that basically there's supply limitations. So basically you have less homes for sale. And then interest rates are actually climbing. We'll get into why, and that comes back to the Japanese yen and kind of the bailout that we try to do. A very small amount of money trying to build confidence. Whenever I see different political leaders, let's say, no matter where in the world, trying to say, hey, everybody stay calm, everybody's fine, everything's good, don't worry about it, that's generally the time I start to worry. So we'll get into exactly how that impacts our interest rates on mortgages. What they were noting is that we have 5% more jobs than we did in 2019, but we have 30% less in sales. They're expecting that there's a lot of pent-up demand. However, you would need the interest rates to stay stable or go down. If they continue to go up, you may see less and less homes being purchased. Speaking about lending, how's credit doing? On August 11th, we have our 90-plus day delinquencies, and we're finding that student loans have actually come down quite significantly from 12.88% now to 7.83%, so that's good news. Auto delinquencies are actually up from 2.93% to 3%. Mortgages are up as well from 1.29% to 1.52%. These are the ones I tend to worry more about because people don't generally like to lose their car or their homes. How's retail doing? Retail sales on August 14th, they are down now at $763.6 billion, down 0.6% month over month. However, they are up 5% year over year, and that's, pretty close to what our PPI is and higher than our CPI and PCE, and we'll get into that in a second as well. How's the consumer doing? So on August 14th, we have the index of consumer sentiment. We're down 7.6% month over month, down 12.4% year over year. Current economic conditions were down 5.5% month over month, down 16% year over year. And the index of consumer expectations were down 8.7% month over month, down 9.5% year over year. And about 70% of people believe that inflation will grow faster than people's income. There's only about 8% of people that believe that their income will grow faster than inflation. So inflation is becoming more of a concern in many of the consumers' minds. The Fed met last time on July 29th. Their Federal Open Market Committee held interest rates at 3.5 to 3.75%. They're maintaining ample reserves. They're still buying up to 3-year treasuries. Inflation remains elevated. However, capital investment and productivity are still strong. Unemployment is steady. Depends on how you're looking at that and how you consider that steady, but we'll get into that as well. Economic activity has expanded. However, there's a lot of uncertainty with what's going to happen in the near future with the Middle East conflict in terms of energy prices and the Strait of Hormuz, as well as Yemen getting involved with the Houthis and blocking another passageway for oil. Do note that 9 people voted to hold interest rates steady, and 3 voted to increase interest rates. So we're starting to see more and more people thinking that we need to raise interest rates. And that's going to be to combat inflation as long as we don't have rising unemployment. Jackson Hole is coming up, and we're going to see what the Fed chair has to say, and then that might be a catalyst to move the markets. Our gross domestic product, or GDP, was positive in first, second, and third quarter at 2.1%, 1.5%. It's currently estimated at 4%. I did say that I expect this to continue to drop somewhat. It was at over 5%, then it was like 4.8%. Now it's 4.0%. Third quarter is not completely over yet, so we'll see what happens there. But 4% would be very nice if that actually was the case. Our inflation. So you have your producer's price index. This is what basically the people that are going to be manufacturing your products have to pay before it gets to you. Your CPI is your consumer price index. That's basically the price on the shelf. And your PCE is personal consumption expenditures. That's actually what you purchased after it's been on the shelf. So on August 13th, our PPI was at 4.7%, dropping. Our PPI core, this is minus food and energy, we're at 4.7%, dropping. August 12th, our consumer price index was at 3.4%. Do realize that the next couple of months determine what the Social Security COLA is, so it's in the best interest of the government to keep this as low as possible during third quarter because then they don't have to pay out as much money to Social Security recipients. And then our PCI core is at 2.5% and dropping. And then July 30th, our PCE was at 3.7% and dropping. Our PCE core minus food and energy was at 3.3% and dropping. And then this ties into the Fed. Fed has a couple of mandates. One is stable prices. They target around 2% inflation. All of these are significantly higher than 2%. They also want to have maximum employment. We'll get into that next. And you want to have moderate long-term interest rates. This becomes very important if you have a very large national debt, or you want to buy a house, or you have a business that you want to invest something to buy something that takes a long time to pay off. If the first two are taken care of, usually the third one's okay. But right now our bond market's going up, and we'll discuss that with the Japanese yen as well. When we go into jobs, on August 5th, we have our ADP. We gained 44,000 jobs in July. That's an independent source. On August 7th, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics from the government said that we lost 23,000 jobs in July, and we only gained 20,000 in June. That was revised down 37,000 jobs. And then in May, we gained only 63,000 jobs. That was basically brought down by 66,000 jobs. So compared to what we thought we have 126,000 jobs less than what we thought. Our labor force participation rate has also significantly dropped. We're at 61.4%, but our unemployment actually went steady or slightly down over the last couple of months. We're at 4.1%. How's that? Well, less people are in the labor market. So what does it mean to be unemployed? Well, to be counted, you have to have applied to something in the last 4 weeks, so you're looking for work. You're able and willing to work, and you didn't find work. So out of those people, you only have 6.9 million people that are considered unemployed. So that's where you get that 4.1%. However, there's another 5.9 million people that haven't looked for a job in 4 weeks, so they're not counted. If you put those two numbers together, it's closer to 7.6%. There's another 4.8 million people that work part-time for economic reasons because they haven't found full-time work and they just took whatever they could. So if you add all those up, you have 17.6 million people that want full-time work that haven't been able to find it. So that's 10.5% of basically the, not labor force because they define it differently, but people that want to work. Of the people that are considered unemployed, 25.5% of them have been unemployed for more than 6 months or greater than 27 weeks. This is why I always encourage people to have some type of emergency fund, preferably 6 months. Reason being is 1 out of 4 people that are on unemployment currently have been unemployed for more than 6 months and haven't been able to find a job. On August 4th, we looked at our JOLTS report. Basically, there are 7.4 million open jobs, 5.3 million hires, 5.4 million separations. If you notice, there's always about 2.5 million, depending on the month, of open jobs that just never get filled. So when people talk about ghost jobs and they're saying, about 20 to 30% of those jobs are actually not real, or they're ghost jobs or fake jobs or whatever you want to call them, that's kind of where it comes from. Many jobs are just left open for many months, and maybe a website somewhere else pulls off of a primary source, and the secondary source doesn't realize that the primary source filled the position, and it just leaves that role open. Of the 5.4 million separations, 1.8 million were layoffs or discharges. I also found it interesting there were 921,000 temporary layoffs. This is up another 153,000 people. So what are some concerns that I have? Well, right now there's the Japanese yen, and we're working with the US dollar, and this impacts bonds. So why did the US try to bail out the yen? This is basically because the Japanese hold the most US debt of anywhere in the world. They hold over $1 trillion of debt, and a lot of that's in our bonds. So how are bonds and US mortgages, like I was talking about over here, intertwined? Well, if you look at the chart, you'll find that US mortgages are effectively maybe 1 to 2% higher than the 10-year US Treasury bond. If the Japanese sell off a bunch of US bonds, effectively the yield has to go up to attract more buyers to buy the US bonds. And if people start to think that inflation is going to stay high, they're going to want more interest on the bonds so they don't lose out to inflation over, say, a 10-year period. So what happens is that drives the US 10-year yield on bonds up. And when that happens, US mortgages also go up. So that basically increases the monthly cost of buying a home in the US if the mortgage interest rate goes up. If the US mortgage rates go up very significantly in a very short period of time, what you could see is a drop in demand for homes, which typically would result in basically lower purchasing prices, but the interest rate itself would be so high that the monthly payment would be higher than it is currently. Next is Iran and US conflict in the Middle East. So there's a fight over the Strait of Hormuz. The US is going through a lot of spending in the defense area because we're going through weapons very rapidly. So Lockheed Martin and, say, Boeing and some other companies, I put a whole video out on how would I invest in World War III. It doesn't matter what war it would be, any war with the US. These are the companies that make the weapons. So I put a video on the channel for that. So if you want to look below, you can see a link to that. Along with this conflict, we have the Strait of Hormuz, which has been blocked. This basically stops about 20% of the world's oil from going through that strait. So what I've seen is a lot of different countries are building out pipelines. It's going to take some time to get there. They have a lot less red tape than the US. They can build pipelines much quicker than we can. They don't have environmentalists or anything like that. So they can finish out a pipeline in a year or something pretty quick. In the US, it might take multiple years, but in the Middle East, they can do it pretty rapidly. That is going to take care of itself, say, over the next year or so, but will we start to run out of strategic stockpiles before that comes online? Also, Venezuela is ramping up production. Venezuela used to be able to pump out about twice that amount before 2020. So we're trying to get more and more online there. About half of all the oil coming out of Venezuela is now coming in through the United States refineries. So that's kind of easing up as well. The U.S. also has a strategic petroleum reserve. We've been drawing down, millions of barrels from here. We are now at about 293 million barrels. This is about a week old, so it's probably come down to like 290 at this point. It's been the lowest in about 40 to 45 years, so that's pretty significant. We're also seeing some concerns with AI bubble. I might be putting a put option in to basically give myself some insurance in case the stock market drops here. We're also finding that equal distribution or equal weight of the S&P 500 may start to outperform just the general S&P 500. because then I won't be as weighted into AI at that point. We're also finding that the US stock market has a very high P/E ratio. The Buffett indicators, Shiller indicators, all of these are very elevated and kind of flashing warning signs at this point. Just there's a large concentration in tech. Be aware of margin, debt, leverage at this point. You don't want to be part of a margin call. Also, margin calls can pull a lot of money out of the market very quick. The market tends to go up kind of like steps and then kind of falls off a cliff at points in time. Hopefully that's not anytime soon. Just keeping aware of that, and that's why I'll probably be purchasing a put option on a good day. Put options and call options and things like that. They do have Vega, or basically they're based on the VIX, or the volatility index, or the fear gauge. So if you have good days, basically options are cheap. If you have bad days, options are a bit more expensive. So I'll look out for that opportunity in the weeks to come. Question people usually have is, why do stocks go up with bad news? And it all comes back to the Fed. If you get bad news and you see a bunch of job losses, they might not raise the interest rate. If you don't raise the interest rate, that's good for people that like to borrow money, and then that helps spur spending. So what am I doing with my money? This doesn't really change that much. And people are like, well, why doesn't it change with all this information? Well, it goes back to statistics. For accounts that have been actively traded over a 20-year period, they fail 90 to 95% of the time, depending on the source, to outperform the S&P 500. So why fight it? So if professionals can't beat it, why am I going to spend all my time and energy doing that? I'd rather just go make more money, invest more, and basically ride the wave. First thing, I get out of debt as much as possible. The only thing I'm okay with is having a long fixed rate, low mortgage rate, and like a 30 or 15-year mortgage. And even that, I'm going to pay it off early. But first, I'm going to have a 6-month emergency fund. This is FDIC, kept in high yield CDs, high yield savings, that sort of thing, about 4%. Second, any money I need in less than 5 years. Say I'm retiring right now and I need money for the next couple of years, or I need to replace my car or a furnace, or a roof, or I'm getting married, or some big purchase. That money I'm not putting in stocks or anything like that. I'm also putting that money into FDIC, high yield CDs, high yield savings, that sort of thing. For money I don't need for at least 5 years, that's where I'm using dollar cost averaging. I'm putting 70 to 80% to the S&P 500, 10 to 20% in total international fund, and about 0 to 10% into bonds. Do realize that bond value is inversely proportional to the interest rate. So if interest rates are going up, then the existing bond value has to go down to allow for that bond to pay out that higher interest or higher yield over the duration of the bond. So right now I'm not buying a lot of bonds. Right now I hold maybe like 8-9% in bonds. I'm not going to increase that until I start to see the Japanese problem kind of take care of itself, or basically inflation dropping around 2%. I also hold a couple $100,000 in like normal metals like gold, silver, copper, make body armor out of that, aluminum. I have steel, I have plate armor, all kinds of other stuff. So that's just because I like metallurgy. I also reinvest in my businesses. So I have a farm, I have YouTube, I have Amazon affiliates, and some other things that I work through that, farm stands, and any other business ideas that come along that I think I can make 10 times what I put in. I'll take those risks. About half the time I'm right and about half the time I'm wrong. So even if I lost half of everything I put in, effectively I'm getting 5 times out everything I put in. I have a lot of different videos on how to start businesses for less than $1,000, basically showing how to limit your upfront risk and get those off the ground and get them to basically build themselves through a lot of effort, of course. But I've known people as well as myself that have made $50,000, $100,000 a year off of these small businesses that basically expand pretty rapidly once you have a book of clients. Well, thank you for watching. Please subscribe. If you want to learn how to make more money, how to save, how to invest, how to be an entrepreneur and limit your risk, this is a channel for you. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and have a great day.